Well, Surrey had a unique problem. Unlike, I think every region had their own unique problem, but ours was truly unique because the state of Alaska had selected most of the land, lowlands in Cook Inlet. And the rest was in wildlife refuges and national wildlife refuge, moose range, and parks. So there was very little below 1,500 feet left for Surrey to select its entitlement out of. Surrey was a little different makeup than the other regions where 5/6 of our shareholders were at large. They didn't belong to a village. We didn't have these villages sucking up all the surface estate and the region stuck with the subsurface. In our case, we had a surface entitlement of over 2 million acres and a subsurface entitlement of about 2.5 million underneath the villages and what came with ours. But there really was nowhere to select from. That instigated litigation with the Department of Interior to get us lands as the act required, like in kind and character to the villages. Well, nobody could argue that these mountaintops and glaciers were anything like in kind to what the villages, our villages had. So that was a unique part of trying to implement ANCSA. It wasn't one of these cookie cutters where everything fit everybody. I mean, Doyon had its problems, Arctic Slope had its problems. I mean, you could go all the way around the state, and each one of them had unique problems. Again, ours was probably a little more unique because of the makeup of the region. Most of our shareholders were from other regions that had migrated to Anchorage over time for jobs, for school, and those kind of things. And the way BIA at the time had set up the application process, you could register where you were from or where you were living. Well, most people didn't understand it, and they ended up registering where they were living at the time, and that was Anchorage. Again, making it a little different, that Surrey was one of the only regions with its own large entitlement that it could select on its own. And most of the other cases, the villages did most of the surface selection, and the region got the subsurface underneath it. We couldn't really select anything. I mean, the withdrawal areas that we got from the Secretary were all the mountaintops and glaciers on the Alaska range on the west side of Cook Inlet. And I mean, there was no way to get to it. It was glaciers. So in the process of the lawsuits, you know, we started this negotiation with the federal government, but then we had also filed a lawsuit against the federal government because they had granted land to the state up near Mount McKinley, which is now State Denali Park. So we filed on that. So the state got involved, and it became a fairly significant three-way trade involving the state and federal government and Surrey. And those negotiations took a lot of different turns and twists because you had to take care of village entitlement at the same time you were taking care of regional entitlement. Villages, 12B and 11A3 entitlement areas that were all sort of included. So everything got convoluted pretty much together in trying to settle it. The only thing that really was not involved in it was the village's core township areas and those areas ringing the village itself. But everything that included their over selections or selections that they couldn't make within the village had to be done outside in a withdrawal area, which we call 11A3, I believe, 11A2 and 3, under ANCSA, that set aside lands somewhere else for them to select their full entitlement out. And ultimately, Surrey ended up in a settlement that gave us our entitlement, but in a strange way. We got entitlement originally for, I'm can't remember the exact acreage, but I think it was $69 million worth of land value that the government gave us government chits for. When I say government chits, there was a provision in ANCSA that allowed ANCSA corporations to select federal excess lands, 3E of ANCSA, and our government surplus lands at that time. So we had a value of $500 an acre for, it was $500 an acre for 69,000 acres, I think it was, whatever that equated to, that allowed us to go out and select these surplus, military surplus government lands. So we did a statewide search and we found stuff like Talkeetna, Murphy Dome, those kind of properties. We were able to go in and select those. We also had a right to select in other regions with the consent of that region. Well, at the time, no other region wanted us in there except Doyon. Doyon allowed us to select 100,000 acres up in the Farewell area out of their region. But all the other regions objected to us coming in to their region. They weren't through their selections yet, so you could understand they didn't want us sort of preempting their selection rights. So we couldn't fulfill our entitlement out of the federal surplus lands in Alaska. There just wasn't enough of them. The process was that you'd find a piece of federal land, they would value that, and then we would apply our chits at $500 an acre. So something like Murphy's Dome cost us $1 million or whatever it was, we would apply so many chits to buy that. Well, that wasn't working. So we had to go back in and amend it again to allow us to select federal surplus lands throughout the United States. And we also couldn't get the rest of our entitlement because there wasn't enough withdrawal areas for it. We couldn't go into other regions. So we got the government then to apply a $250 an acre value to those lands that we couldn't get, and we added that to the chit pool along with a CPI adjuster. That gave us, I don't know, 130 million, something like that, in value in this chit pool. And we still couldn't really find enough surplus land, so because of the CPI adjuster, it kept going up and up and up in value. Realizing that there wasn't enough surplus lands around, we went back in and amended again, and this time to allow us to take, which at the time were failed properties, like failed real estate that came in to play through. I can't even remember the name of those REITs and all the stuff that was formed. The federal government took all these properties back where all these real estate deals had failed, apartment buildings and all that. And that allowed us to go out then and be able to buy up these properties nationwide. So we did. We went out and we bought a lot of apartment complexes in Texas and California, Arizona, and Florida, just all over the country. So we had significant real estate holdings at the time, but we still didn't use up that chit pool. It had built up through the CPI adjustment over time. And I think even today there's still a residual amount in that chit pool, probably 6 to 10 million, something like that, that's still in that chit pool that they haven't been able to spend down at this point, and probably a good reserve to have anyway. So. But that's how SERI really sort of got into the real estate side, and it was because we really didn't have the ability to select lands either in our region or out of our region because other regions wouldn't allow us in to their regions at the time. It was a unique thing. It was I guess, sort of outside of the box way of dealing with entitlement. We still have some shareholders today that are considered dissident shareholders that still don't understand and think we somehow did something with that land and we never got our entitlement. But when you calculate out the values that we got away from the CPI adjustment to what we bought, you can actually trace the total amount of entitlement for Cook Inlet region. It was an interesting process. We ended up with some selections in the Kenai National Moose Range, but those were subsurface selections for oil and gas, and we had a provision in there that was sort of unique at the time, and a lot of people didn't understand, which people are looking at today, is we could develop the coal in the Kenai National Wildlife Refuge through in situ gasification, which means that you burn the coal underground, you lift off the methane gases at the other end. As you push it through, you're pushing oxygen down as you burn it, and then you're pulling the gases out the other side. Well, it's interesting because that technology is sort of caught on today, and that's a big thing around the country, is where they're lifting methanes off of coal bed methanes for gas. And I understand Siri today is proposing and working on a project for Beluga to do just that. We had that right within the Kenai National Moose Range. I doubt that we would ever get it permitted today. I mean, the government has a process that I think is, you know, not conducive to helping Alaska Native corporations do anything, because there are so many avenues that they can stop development to take things away from you and not have to pay for it. That's what they use. The permitting process today is just about impossible to get anything put in place, and especially if you're trying to do something within a national, even though you have the right to, the government will find a way to stop you. To me, it's, you know, sort of the old way of doing business. The government's back to it. You know, I promise you this and I'll give you this, but I'm going to take it away from you by some other means. They've always been very good at treating Alaska Natives and American Indians that way, so give to you in one hand, but really take it away.